I'm going to give just a brief introduction to lay some of the groundwork for what we'll be discussing. And the two handouts that are coming, the only one you need to actually look at the moment or may want to look at later, is a model or a diagram of how the original Richard J. Daley machine worked and how the new Richard M. Daley machine worked. And the thesis of this conference this morning is that we are at a political crossroads in our local politics. There is a clear contrast, as you'll see in the two diagrams, between the Richard J. Daley machine and the new Richard M. Daley machine. And the question is, even with the new modern machine in Chicago, is machine politics still a style that's adequate for us in the 21st century? Just to briefly describe the two machines, and then I'll go on to the predictions of the individual races. The old Richard J. Daley machine gave out patronage jobs to ward organizations that created the Democratic patronage army of precinct captains that was then able to win elections. It likewise gave out contracts to local developers and businessmen in return for campaign contributions. It provided city services as favors to voters who voted for the party candidates. And as a result of all this, besides winning the election for mayor and the majority of seats in the aldermen, the county board members, the park district, the school board, which were appointed by the mayor ended up with dictatorial control over a rubber-stamped city council. Now we're in a new era, and things are different. We have the new Richard M. Daley machine, which is shown on the other side of the page. The new Richard M. Daley machine gives patronage jobs to his personal political organizations like the HDO, Hispanic Democratic Organization, and the purpose is not to strengthen the ward organizations, but to build a personal patronage army of City Hall volunteers, as they like to call themselves. Second, while the Richard M. Daley still gives business contracts, as some of you in the room may know, in return for campaign contributions, just like his father did, he also receives, and this is not well understood, Richard M. Daley receives 1/3 of his $7 million in campaign contribution war chest from businessmen and individuals in the global economy who were not interested in contracts at City Hall, but want certain amenities for the city and want certain kinds of tax breaks for their sector of the economy. What this allows Richard M. Daley to do differently from his father is to run high-tech, expensive campaigns, and that causes him, in turn, because of the source of his money, to have different governmental priorities from his father. The new Richard M. Daley machine still gives out favors to voters who vote for Daley candidates, as was shown in the Sorge trial. And the new Richard M. Daley still has dictatorial control over a rubber-stamped city council. It is a new, modern machine, modernized from the old one, but it is still a machine. So the 2006 and the 2007 elections place us at a political crossroads locally. The question before the voters, beyond all of the individual candidates running and all of the slogans, is shall we continue the old governments and the current political domination, or will we as voters reject these alternatives? And there are 5 key trends at work in these elections. The first trend, the indictments, court cases, and convictions have weakened but have not killed the Richard M. Daley machine and the Stroger patronage armies and the corrupt contracts in both city and county government. Second trend, which is afoot, is the City Council, to shock of many, has begun to show some, but not really very much, independence. Just to give you an example, from 2003 to 2005, there were 29 divided roll call votes out of probably 5,000 votes cast. That's not exactly a wave of independence. The third trend, since Tony is here, Todd Stroger is at the moment leading in the race for Cook County Board President, but it is not a done deal. Tony is gaining support and gaining ground. The fourth trend, there are many more challengers emerging in the mayoral elections. If Luis Gutierrez and Mike Quigley should join the race, the mayoral race would go to a runoff between Jesse Jackson Jr. and Mayor Daley. That would have almost seismic effects on the politics of Chicago. And the fifth and sort of least covered event that is happening is there are more strong aldermanic challengers than at any time in the last 20 years. And it is expected that between 10 to 15 aldermanic incumbents may be defeated, which would change the balance of power in the current rubber-stamped city council. I'll take you back to 1986 when Harold Washington had a bare minimum of 26-24 in the city council to be able to rule the city finally. The next year, there were 40 votes for Harold Washington in the city council. Aldermen are like lemmings. They go where they think they can get the rewards and power. It does not take winning 26 seats in the city council to begin a revolution of change in Chicago politics. The first speaker we have this morning, or the first panel member, hopefully to be joined by the others, is Carlos Hernandez Gomez, arguably the best political reporter in all of Chicago, formerly with Public Radio or NPR and currently with CLTV. Carlos?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind here, just the fact that we are sitting here assembled and talking about a contest in the Chicago municipal elections is in itself very noteworthy, in that several years ago, one would have never assumed that the mayor would ever have even the slightest bit of a contest. I mean, Cubs are the North Side team, Sox are the South Side team, and Richard M. Daley is the mayor for life. And I think that has been changed not only by demographic changes, but mostly by what's been coming out of 219 South Dearborn. I mean, we're talking about a United States attorney that has essentially put City Hall and even state government on notice that patronage isn't legal, that the way things have been done for a very long time is the way they shouldn't be done, at least according to federal juries. I mean, many of us have long accepted that it's a fact of life. People who do political work have city jobs. That's just the way things work in Chicago. That's how they've worked for years. But I think since Pat Fitzgerald has begun this investigation, ever since the Sun-Times broke the hired truck story and they started looking into City Hall patronage, I mean, we've moved up the ladder. I mean, no one ever thought that a patronage chief in City Hall would be the subject or a convict in a federal case. And I think the feds obviously haven't stopped. They are moving. Of course, they say the investigation is ongoing, and they're moving up the ladder. So, of course, that's led me to question, is the mayor still mayor for life? And I think polling, most recent polling by the Tribune, shows that while the public does not buy the mayor's denials about City Hall corruption, they're not, in effect, holding it against him. But that's a question for February. A unique development that happened yesterday, and I think we should all take notice of, is that Mayor Daley finally appointed a city clerk. We've been without a city clerk since James Lasky quit after he was indicted by the feds. The mayor picked a man named Miguel Del Valle. He's long been known as an independent Hispanic political leader. He's a state senator from the Humboldt Park area. But what this does is this helps the mayor in several ways. One, Miguel Del Valle doesn't have any taint of scandal. While he has made peace with HDO, the mayor's political Hispanic arm, he is not really associated with them. So this gives him an independent Latino person to put on the ticket in February. And it really also hurts Luis Gutierrez, because now Miguel Del Valle is the leading Puerto Rican in Chicago, no longer Luis Gutierrez, and he may have to rethink what he is doing come February, Dick.
Go ahead. Some more comments, sage comments, as you feel.
So, I think that's something to keep in mind. I think it was a stroke of political genius by the mayor to do this yesterday, because Miguel has a very stellar reputation as being honest, for integrity, and for being someone who doesn't really have the taint of scandal. And I think this helps the mayor shore up, because the mayor has been very adept at co-opting opposition over the years, whether it's in the African-American community, in the liberal lakefront community, which really doesn't exist anymore, or even in the Latino community. I mean, he has his Danny Solis, who's the alderman in Pilsen, is the president pro tem of the city council. He is someone who's been able to sort of shore up Hispanic support for the mayor, but he is in the Mexican-American community, and Del Valle is in the Puerto Rican community. More of the independent Latino politicians who opposed HDO, the mayor's Hispanic political arm, have been within the Puerto Rican community. So I think the mayor having appointed Del Valle as city clerk certainly helps him in that this may give Luis Gutierrez some pause, whether he assumes whether or not he jumps into the race for mayor. I mean, one might have talked of Luis as far as the futures market as saying he was, buy and hold, and now he's, after the mayor appointed Del Valle, he's sell, sell, sell. So that's sort of another way to look at that. But I think something Dick pointed to earlier, not only there's the issue of corruption and people perhaps rethinking the daily machine in Chicago, there's also the issue of the city council, while not becoming independent, because they certainly are not an independent body, have defied the mayor in a couple of votes. Of course, most notably the big box vote on a living wage for big box retailers. The mayor was able to veto it and peel off the necessary city council votes to sustain his veto. However, you have some in organized labor and in community groups who are saying they're going to target some aldermen for having done this. So this is a case where you have several aldermen who peeled off their vote to support the mayor, who are going to get targeted by the Service Employees Union and any other labor union. The question is, are these unions going to pump the necessary money and political foot soldiers to make these aldermanic races competitive? I mean, it's one thing to promise that you're going to put $2 million into the aldermanic races. It's another thing to actually, to quote Miriam Santos, belly up and actually do it. So, well, I digress. I apologize to Miriam if that offended her. And that's obviously the question. Is there public anger over the city council's lack of independence to do this? However, if the Service Employees Union, which is a very politically active union, you may remember they backed Barack Obama in the Senate race early on, and they are among the more progressive unions that's very adept at bringing their constituency out to vote. So the question is, even if they are successful in only a mere handful of these races, which I'm not saying they will be, but taking that possibility, the city council's image would really change.
Should we take questions?
Ready for a question?
I'm ready for questions.
Ready for questions? Okay, Kathy Posner. Oh, yeah.
Paul, do you want to join us?
Okay, Kathy Posner, Board of Governors
We'll
of
put Paul in as
City
a
Clerk.
sub for a moment until we get some of our other speakers.
Till we get what? Oh,
Until
Paul
we
has
get real
to.
speakers.
Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
No, Rich Kelly's gone. We don't have to do that anymore.
Oh, okay.
we ready to go? Okay. Since you brought up the Cook County Board President race, and Mr. Pareka has been kind enough to honor us with his presence, and Mr. Stroger is not here, maybe I wonder if you could give any advice to Mr. Pareka of what he can do to help the numbers increase so he can win that race.
Well, as a reporter, it's not my job to give people advice. I think it would violate, ethical.
Okay, but Mr. Simpson can and Mr.
Oh, he
Green
can. Okay.
Win the lottery quickly and buy around $4 or $5 million worth of TV time. I think that would be my advice.
Tony, I think we can give you a moment to reply for yourself if you want to, not about the subject, but her question is, obviously you're slightly behind in the polls. I won't go into the details of that, but do you have reasons to think that those numbers will change?
Well, I will beg to differ with my esteemed former professor, Simpson, about the polling. I think that the polling that will come out by the end of this weekend or early next week will show indeed that our campaign is leading, and it's more than the margin of error. And there have been a number of polls done with a sample of likely voters in the range of 410 to 450 likely voters in Cook County. And the race was essentially 40-40 with 20% undecided. Those undecided 20% are now beginning to swing in our direction, and a significant number of those 20% that were undecided heretofore are indeed joining our campaign and supporting my candidacy. I think that's a general trend that is going to continue because Stroger is running on the strength of his family name. He's relying on the machine that is watching its wheels fall off. And I think he's running a Rose Garden strategy that is not going to serve him well. On all of the various platforms and forums that he has chosen to appear, he has not been prepared. He has not been informed about the function of the county government, did not have his facts together. And I think that that is indeed going to hurt him as voters begin to focus more and more intensely on this very important race, which I think is going to reflect a seismic shift in Cook County politics. All of the things that you have stated, Professor Simpson, are absolutely true. The Sorge conviction has indeed, for once and for all, rather, removed the Rostenkowski defense. You know, everybody's bouncing checks and everybody's cashing in stamps. Well, maybe true, but you know, Sorge is now the poster child for the premise that patronage, hiring, firing, altering of applications and test scores is now a criminal act. It will no longer be tolerated. And the federal monitor, Noel Brennan, is representing Judge Anderson in the City Hall Human Resource Department and will continue to do so. Therefore, no hiring, firing, promotions, transfers, or overtime are going to be done along political lines any longer. And I believe Judge Anderson, pursuant to a petition for a rule to show cause that Mr. Shackman has filed with respect to county hiring related to the information provided by Mr. Petrides about the, am I giving too much information?
Yeah.
Just finish, so we can-
Well, I'm trying to give you some basis,
background.
some basis and background for the premise that it's a brand new political landscape out there, and the old rules really don't apply. And I think that the voters are going to come out and educate themselves about the candidates, our platforms, and our visions for county government. And therefore, I think that Todd Stroger has a real challenge to now cast himself as more of a Republican than I am, more of a reformer than I am, when in fact, for 14 years has done absolutely nothing to advance any of those causes. It will be a hell of a sales job.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Pareka. Very good.
Next question.
Judith Reese, member of the City Club and 12-year trustee of University of Illinois, Professor Simpson.
My
que-
boss. By the way, the University of Illinois is very pleased to be a co-sponsor of the event today with City Club and Roosevelt University.
Yes, good, good. My question is addressed to your co-panelist about the backstory. I'd like to know what's the backstory behind the member of Mayor Daley's administration who announced several days ago that he was running for city clerk. And first of all, what is his backstory? And did this, you think this prompted the mayor to slate his own candidate? Or would he just let that stay vacant, that position stay vacant even longer?
Well, I think the question at City Hall for a while was he just not going to appoint a city clerk? And we kept
Yeah.
asking him what the statute says, shall. And, you know, there was a question of what shall means. Of course, Illinois, we've had that question of what shall means for years, whether it was the Rosemont Casino, whether shall actually meant shall. And apparently shall does mean shall. So the mayor had to appoint a city clerk. And he had said, when Sedda announced that he was going to run, that the mayor was not supporting him. So there was no...
Right. Is he toast?
Sedda.
Is he history?
Tell the name of the candidate. Who's
Sedda. He's a city. He was in the Daley administration. He said...
Serta.
Serta.
I'm sorry, I was saying Sedda because I was pronouncing it accurately. My apologies for pronouncing a Latino name properly. Please forgive me.
God love the City Club. You don't get this up and down the dial. How do you pronounce it?
We don't get it on the
Serta.
dial at all.
Serta. Now, I was in Europe. Who is, no offense, who's Serta? Serta. Who is he?
He's in the mayor's administration. He's not like a notable. He's not someone like a Danny Solis or
Well,
someone who's...
Just to throw this out, a guy like that announcing isn't going to intimidate anybody.
Of course not. And the mayor...
That will work against him. We're talking about city clerk.
Right.
It's city clerk. You hand out dog licenses and car stickers. I mean, it's not... I mean, when people talked to Alderman Bill Beavers about whether he wanted, he said, I don't want to hand out, vehicle stickers. I mean, sort of denigrating the position. Of course, some have argued whether the position even needs to remain an elected post, and whether it should just be an actual appointed position and not an actual city, constitutional officer. However, the question is, the mayor appointed Miguel del Valle. Miguel del Valle has incredible name ID, not only in the Hispanic community. It's unless there's someone with a couple of $1 million, I don't see him losing.
The key in all of this is what arrangements the mayor and DeValier made. Are they going to run as a team or not? That, to me, would be the big question. But DeValier DeValier has his own constituency. He's never been close to the mayor. He's always been on the outside. Even in Springfield, he's been his own man.
But the whole point of the mayor appointing Del Valle is that he has someone now who isn't tainted with scandal, someone who has a quote-unquote reputation as an independent politician. However, Del Valle has made peace with HDO, the mayor's Hispanic political arm, so it's not like he's some radical, independent, lefty Latino politician who's not going to play along with the mayor.
Okay.
So is Cerda history?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
As
Thank
we
you.
would say.
But at least we now know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah.
I mean, he might say sort of. I'm saying the proper Hispanic president.
No.
Barrett?
I mean, like Jose Padilla, because of Padilla.
Guys,
His name is
it's okay.
Padilla.
It's okay. Barrett?
Thank you, Dick, and thank you, panelists. My name is Barrett Peterson. I'm the vice chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party and the Democratic Committeeman from Leyden Township. I'm also a member of the City Club. Thank you for having this event. We had broached the subject of the county board presidency race, and I'm wondering what you panelists think is going to be affecting this race with regard to the anti-gay votes that were cast by Tony Parica, and whether anti-choice or pro-choice issues are going to be very valid at the Republican and Democratic level for county board president.
Well, I think Todd Sturgeon's hoping that's going to be the case. I think Todd Sturgeon's whole campaign is he's a gun nut, he's a right-wing nut, he's anti-abortion, and he's anti-gay. I think that's basically that's what Sturgeon says at every single stop. He's against assault weapons ban. He's against this. He's against that. However, with the exception of what George Dunn did on abortion and what Phil did on abortion, Parica said he's not going to rescind abortion rights or take away partner benefits. The question is, does the public believe that? They have a right to question that. I'm sure they do, and as they will with anybody who makes a public announcement. Will that play out? Of course it will play out. I mean, I think you look at certain media are particularly playing those particular issues up. I mean, the question is, does the county really deal with abortion? At the hospital, certainly. Do they deal with gay rights issues? Certainly. With the issue of partner benefits. The question is, short answer is, I don't know. But I think the county, there are plenty of other issues that matter at the county that don't involve abortion or gay rights, for instance.
Let's try and keep this on Chicago for a moment. Dude. Running for mayor. No disrespect. There's never been a book on county board presidents.
I mean, does anyone even know who
Hey,
the
there's
county...
an opening, Paul. You can write that one.
Hey, $100 to someone who can name 3 county board presidents.
Oh, get the money
Get
out.
the money out,
Put the
man.
money on the table.
Get it on the table.
Does anyone even know how the
No, wait a minute. No.
I was being facetious.
Carlos, this is the wrong crowd. These people have no lives.
I can name the next.
Go ahead,
I can
please.
name the next county board president. I just want to say first off.
Name again.
Yes, my name is Bill Nagel. I'm a member of the City Club, and I always get a kick, Mr. Prake, out of incumbents who run on a reform platform. I've watched your antics in the county board, and it seems to me that your main claim to fame is making a lot of noise and trying to obstruct the programs of the former president, John Stroger. I just want to say that Todd Stroger has an admirable record for working for the working people in this state, in this
Do you have a
county.
question?
Yeah. My question is, what effect do you feel that the endorsement of organized labor will have on the Stroger-Preka campaign?
Deliver several 100,000 votes. What do you mean? What effect does it have? It has the same effect it always has.
The real question we have to ask, dealing with this, because obviously Mr. Prake is here and the county board president's race is a month away, is what impact that's going to have on the mayor's contest. I mean, that's to me is, that's what's really at stake here. The county board race we're not discussing, though we are discussing, but we're not supposed to be discussing it. But the fact is, what would happen if Mr. Pareka wins to the mayoral race? That is going to shake things up, and that would be a major shakeup. But remember, for 2 years under Richard J. Daley, there was a Republican president of the Cook County Board,
Dick Ogilvy.
which didn't slow down Mayor Daley a bit. But nevertheless, That is something, the relationship there would be something important. But as far as Chicago politics are concerned, the mayor's race has always taken precedent over the Cook County race, the Cook County Board, simply because there's much more policy making. A lot of times the county board is dealing with budgets of other county officers who are doing or not doing their job very well. And running for mayor, you are the CEO. And that's a big, big difference.
And Paul, realistically, if we look at the public's consciousness of the county government, granted it's a big item on our tax bills, but really, when did people really start paying attention to county government? It's been in recent years, really, hasn't it?
Just last year is
the last couple of years.
We don't discuss patronage in the City Club because it is something, we are all reformers here.
There's plenty in both. There's plenty in both.
No.
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 There are more jobs in the city
City.
than there are in the county, roughly speaking, and many more jobs in the county are tied down with professional things like nurses that you can't make do work.
And
precinct.
many of the jobs in the county are people who do the hiring are not the county board president, they're the various county officers. No one's going to tell the sheriff who to hire, or they could try, or tell the county assessor. They're individual players. Yes. Okay.
Professor Redfield.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Kent Redfield, and I'm a member of the City Club, at least for the next year.
I think we ought to ask for tenure, Kent. You know,
We'll negotiate the rest. I have a question about the politics of race as it relates to the city of Chicago and this and future mayor elections. And, you know, when I first got here and down in Springfield, where I've stayed for the last 30 years, I learned about Chicago politics by reading Paul Green's articles. And he used to talk about the mayor of Chicago winning kind of set by being the second choice. When the white ethnic would challenge the mayor, then the African Americans would vote with Mayor Daley. And when Dick Newhouse was running, I think for the African American was running, then the white ethnics would go with the mayor. And that was one of the ways that Richard J. Daley can maintain. So what is the future in terms of the politics of race? Now it's not just white ethnics in Bridgeport and African Americans, but now we have Hispanic politics, and that's obviously a misnomer when you just, because we've already talked about Puerto Ricans and Mexicans, and we all know what Gutierrez's district looks like. So how is the politics of race going to play out in this election, and then long term, what's the future of the politics of race in Chicago?
let me give a quick summary. Richard J. Daley got elected on support from the Irish and the blacks in 55 and 59. He lost the white vote in the first two elections, which isn't normally remembered. He then rearranged the Democratic Party and made it a white ethnic based party, and blacks began voting first with their feet and then later voted directly for other candidates like Jane Byrne, Harold Washington, and so forth. In council wars, we obviously had a very direct split between blacks and whites, with Latinos for the first time going with Harold Washington and making possible all of his victories, particularly the first ones, which were so close. He only won with 36% of the vote. Without the Latino vote, he wouldn't have won his first election in '83. Richard M. Daley rearranged it again and won with the white and Latino vote in his first key elections. Blacks have begun to vote for him more recently, but it's a very tenuous base. What's happening in this election, and why the question about Louis Gutierrez, no one really quite expects Louis Gutierrez to be the next mayor of the city of Chicago. But should Louis Gutierrez run, and particularly if Mike Quigley should run as well, there will definitely be a runoff because they will pick up enough racial votes. The black vote will be split between several candidates that are already announced or nearly announced in the African American community. But the Latino vote, if it were tied down by someone like Louis Gutierrez, would pull out of Daley's support base. If Quigley only got a few votes of liberals on the north side of Chicago, it would pull out of Daley's support base. And if we got into a runoff, probably the Latinos and the white progressives would be tempted for the first time to go with Jesse Jackson Jr., although it would be a difficult sale. So race is still alive and well. Race is the second most important determinant of voting after party identity, and often they're the same.
Well, I think something to keep in mind here when you look at the issue of race in Chicago politics is some of Mayor Richard M. Daley's greatest strengths are where some of his father's great weaknesses were. Richard M. Daley has been very adept at bringing people into his fold, where you want to call it co-opting, whatever. He's been able to, cut African Americans in, cut Latinos in. He's been able to take groups that may not have been traditionally backing the guy from Bridgeport, have turned them into very strong allies. Some of his greatest support is among African American clergy and among Latinos and among even progressive, liberal whites who would have called him Dirty Little Richie when he was in the Senate, as Don Clark Netsch did many years ago.
We can't use what's happened in the past today. The city of Chicago is far different in 2006 than it was in 1983. I will spare you all the stuff I've written on this because obviously most of you have, Ken Redfield have read it. Three things. Richard J. Daley was elected in 55 because of the black support. In 63, he lost the white vote and was elected because of black support. Party blacks, and those party blacks have always been loyal to the Democratic Party. The number one example of that is the father of your opponent, John Stroger. So that is a factor that's there. There's a difference between party blacks, African Americans, and from the community. And that's going to split. That's still going to be there. Number two, when Dick Simpson was alderman, there were the lakefront liberals. That is now an oxymoron. They may live on the lakefront, but when it comes to economic issues, they are very, very conservative. And Daley's got tremendous support along the lakefront. Tremendous support. Obviously, the mitigating factor here is the problems with the Sorich and all the other investigations. Without that, there wouldn't be running. Third, and this is the most painful thing of all, I made a mistake. I was wrong in an analysis. I know it happens. I'll never be waving from the balcony at the Vatican, I guess. But the bottom line is that when Mr. Dillard and his allies changed the way a Chicago mayor gets elected by making it nonpartisan, I wrote that was an insurance policy for Daley. I was wrong because I think Dick Simpson has a very valid point. The difference now is not going to be the Jane Byrne, Rich Daley, Harold Washington scenario. Now it's going to be a lot of people running and then getting into a runoff. The key phrase in a runoff election means that at the first round, no one got 50% plus one. Now, will Gutierrez run? I doubt it. Where's the money? And our last point I'll make, and concern here will be raised. Rich Daley, like his father, has a very, very long memory. Look around the city and look at all the statues and commemorations to Jane Byrne. We're just filled with that. Louis Gutierrez made a name for himself because twice he pulled brilliant moves, once backing Washington and once backing Daley. That's how he became a congressman. He's not going to jeopardize it so that Jesse Jackson Jr. can get into a runoff with Richard Daley. Louis is never going to be that much. He's not throwing himself over the barbed wire. So my guess is that Dorothy Brown will run, Jesse Jackson Jr. will probably run, and as of today, Daley will probably get between 58 and 62% of the vote. There won't be a second round. Think Schmeling-Lewis second fight. That's for some of you old timers and my guys, right? There you go. All right, go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Hello, my name is Tim Egan. I'm a City Club member, and I want to thank you for the panel here. And I also want to ask the panel to identify some of the individual aldermen you believe that are going to be most challenged. And just for the record, don't let me being in the room influence you, as I am a candidate for alderman of the 43rd Ward. So.
Well, I think...
Great stuff.
We won't let it influence us. How's
that? Well, certainly some people, if organized labor really is going to kick in, first the SEIU is going to kick in and really go after some aldermen, certainly the flippers in the big box debate are going to be targeted, particularly someone like George Cardenas, who, of course, originally ran with big support from HDO, the mayor's Hispanic political arm. So I guess he'd be one that I would say is a vulnerable one.
There are a number of races. I'll just name a few of them. In the third ward, Dorothy Tillman has two strong challengers. The challenger, Pat Dowell, got 35% of the vote last time. There is, I think, a stronger challenger in Mel Monroe. I see it as a runoff easily, and that Dorothy may well not be reelected. In the second ward, Heathcock is not exactly the world's model alderman. She has two strong opponents, one white, one black. In the 43rd ward that you mentioned, there are at least 3 of you challenging Vi Daly. There may be 10 by now, I don't know. But beyond your own campaign, Michelle Smith is very strong and is expecting to raise a good bit of money. In the 50th ward against Bernie Stone, I don't want to call him a Neanderthal, but let's say he's been there since I was, back in '71. Bernie Stone is being challenged by several candidates. 2 of them are strong. In the 32nd ward, there's a strong set of contenders beginning to develop. There are challenges to Joe Moore, and there will be challenges to Helen Schiller, but my general prediction is all of the what you might call the independent aldermen will be reelected. All of the aldermen in great jeopardy are machine clones of one variety and another, and we don't have time enough to list all of them, but there are about 10 to 15 races.
Sharon Alter, City Club. My question is, if Jesse Jackson Jr. runs for mayor, based on his organization and his ability to raise funds, do any of you on the panel foresee him having an impact by his endorsements, if he makes any endorsements for city council? In other words, he may realize he may not be able to win the election if Paul Green is right, but if he can institute a runoff for April, and in the meantime also have an impact on the aldermanic races to help him when he becomes mayor, if he does, or if he doesn't become mayor, to still have a foothold on the city council.
Well, there's going to be some battling on the south side. Certainly, Jackson is going to back some candidates. There's talk of his wife running in Bill Beavers' ward, his 7th ward. Beavers is going to take over John Stroger's spot on the county board, and Beavers wants to install his daughter in that seat, as of course as often happens in Chicago when things are handed down from parent to child. So that's certainly going to be one of those races, and Jackson is certainly targeting some other races as well.
How many
I
more?
think,
How many would you say is he targeting?
Well, he's particularly in the black and Latino community, he's looking at the races I mentioned and others. I don't know whether he will back as many as 10, and there's a debate within his campaign whether he should directly endorse or simply oppose the incumbent. And that I don't think's been worked out in the Jackson campaign. But you're quite right. Between SEIU, which is mostly strong in the minority communities, and Jesse Jackson, whose greatest strength lies in the black community but will be lending support to some of the races in the Latino community, we're talking maybe up to 15. The north side is sort of running on its own with only minimal, and 32 the SEIU will endorse, but I don't know whether they will in all the other wards. Jackson, probably, it's whether the aldermen want Jackson's endorsement on the north side is not clear in some of the races, but there will be money funneled and workers funneled to some of those races. So I think for the first time, we're seeing interesting aldermanic elections on a broad scale. And they have, both SEIU and Jackson, but there are other forces, IVI-IPO.
Oh, Dick, you're living in the...
Come on, they don't exist
You're
anymore.
20 years behind time.
I understand, guys.
They don't exist.
Next time you want to run a campaign against some of these people, you try it, Paul. They're better campaigners than you are. Now, the other thing, though, is you also have other forces beginning to think about weighing in for lots of local reasons. In some places, they're mad about certain developments. In other places, they're simply seeing there's an Asian candidate running in the 50th ward. Well, Asians don't have a single seat on the city council and have never held a seat on the city council. You begin to get national interest in an Asian candidate running in the 50th ward. Her name is Nancy Dolar. So there's stuff at play that isn't normally there. There are resources that running an independent single aldermanic race were not usually available to you. They are available now. I don't guarantee it's going to be a landslide or that the whole city council is going to be swept away, but isn't it nice to have a choice for a change?
Well, let me just say one thing. And I didn't mean to be disrespectful, but the bottom line is you're talking as if there were organized forces out there with campaign treasuries. I think the IVI IPO's total budget is $4.26. I mean, we're talking about people who, who talk a good game, have meetings, have endorsements, and they're meaningless. And the Jackson organization, the Jackson thing, that is not. Where is he going to raise the money? How's he going to raise the money? And again, I'll say it as coldly as I can. You have to. little sarcasm coming from the crowd. You have to submit where your money's coming from. And if this is going to be a bloodbath, if it's going to be a war, names will be taken and be written down. So if you're a developer in the city, are you going to drop a lot of money on the Jesse Jackson campaign? I doubt it. Where's the money going to come for his campaign, let alone to filter to all these other ward campaigns? And he's not Harold Washington. I mean, everyone just thinks that he's the next Harold Washington. That's not happening. I could tell you 5 African-American aldermen who would love to see him run and get beat badly. So this is not a replay of '83. Yes, I was wrong in saying that it gives Daley a guaranteed victory because of the no longer primary. I was wrong on that. But the bottom line is that unless someone could raise some serious money and, moreover, find a way, other than if the U.S. attorney comes in, that's always the whammy, I just don't see how you can get the citywide organization, and where the big votes are, is in areas that there's a lot of enemies out there for a guy like Congressman Jackson. He's a great campaigner. He's smart as hell. I moderated his first debate for Congress. But he's running. He's never had competition. How he stands up and how he raises money in a citywide race dealing with municipal issues, it's going to be very tough for him. I'll just say it. It could happen. It'll be very, very tough. So, but Dick, I wasn't disparaging these people, but, saying someone's running here and someone's running there, noisy squawks till money talks. And I just don't see a lot of these people who are talking now actually having the kind of dollars. And if the mayor really contends, and that's the most valid point, has the mayor slowed down to the point that he has lost his edge, he didn't even have a fundraiser last year. Obviously, that's going to stop. He's going to have a lot of fundraisers, and the Hyatt Regency will be hopping again. But he'll raise $10 million faster than some of these people can raise $10,000. I'll leave it at that.
Victoria Cooper, I was interested by Daley's announcement of appointment of DeValle when he said that he wasn't only going to give out parking stickers, but was going to be his major policy person on education. I found this very interesting because I think that education is an area where the mayor is vulnerable, particularly with some of the complaints about reform in the city, in the high schools, the CPS. Could you comment on the role that education as a issue is going to play in the election? Will it have traction? And how do people see DeValle's role, who has historically been very strong on education in the mayor's race?
Well, I guess that certainly gives the mayor a second use for Miguel Del Valle, because he, of course, has been an outspoken advocate on this education appropriations in the Senate, in the state Senate in Springfield, particularly talking about issues like, particularly the reform of funding of education has been one of Del Valle's pet issues. Of course, in Illinois, the issues of tax swap and those issues have never been very popular. But certainly that gives a certain added credibility to these issues of education. The question is a candidate going to attack the mayor in education? That's the problem. What do you attack them? I guess in the broader scope of things, what does an opponent attack the mayor on? I mean, people in Chicago have a very large tolerance for things. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, you look at the issues of graft. People have not really cared. I mean, when's the last time an incumbent show has been tossed out because of corruption issues? I can't think of one, Paul.
No,
other
but
than Big Bill Thompson.
What the candidates will do is connect the corruption up. So for the white area, for instance, they'll say not only there is corruption, they'll say that corruption has raised your property taxes 25 to 200%. Now that may be an over-exaggeration. I understand how the figures are worked out. They'll say that the waste in City Hall is $400 million this year, and if you add it over the 17 years, it becomes however many billion dollars that is. For the Latino community, they're going to be saying, even with Miguel del Valle on the ticket, that we might get a better deal. Certainly we get a better deal if Latino was mayor, but we might get a better deal with another candidate. And that may be enough to at least split the Latino vote. For the black community, they're only getting 9% of the contracts. They get about 30% of the jobs, but they have lost ground since Daley has been mayor, and every African American in Chicago has got that figured out. Daley did well the last time, but it was against a weak African American opponent. This time, the African Americans, I think, are going to rally, and if there are multiple candidates, even those that don't like Jesse Jackson Jr. will like Dorothy Brown or will like the other candidates.
My big problem with that, Dick, is you make Chicago sound like Iraq. You got this community and that community, the Shiites and the Sunnis and the Kurds.
We were called the Beirut on the lake.
You're back in the 1980s. You're back in the 1980s again. There is a lot of things that are different, and the biggest difference is you have tremendous African American economic mobility. You've got gentrification taking place in many black wards. It's not going to be a replay of '83.
I agree.
I mean, I did a lot of books on that, and not that I'm against that. It was a good time. But no, so I just don't think that you're going to have these tribes, that the way you're describing them, the white community, the black community, the Hispanic community. There are great differentiations within each of those groups, and I just don't think it's one group. I just don't buy it. And I think when Daley ran against Bobby Rush in 1999, he beat him 72 to 28%, carrying 33 out of 50 wards, including his own second ward, Rush's second ward. You're right. Paul Jakes was not a great candidate, but he did win 6 precincts.
But who's counting, Mike?
Yeah. Which amazed me, by the way. Identify yourself and what township you represent, sir.
I'm Mike Kreloff, Northfield Democratic Committeeman, and I'm not a member of the City Club, but I'd be glad to do a panel sometime. My question
for the high pay.
My question was, to me, the veto of big box was a significant change over how the city council has been. And if I could define the city council as, the role of an alderman, are you a housekeeper, or are you a policymaker, or are you both? And I think most aldermen would say you ought to be both, but we haven't seen a lot of policy making until big box. And I guess I'd like to be president of the Joe Moore fan club, but he got hammered in the Tribune last Sunday. And I'm just wondering, I have a sense that the Tribune is afraid of the city council. Are they ready for democracy kind of a view? What's your views on that? Can the city council handle these sorts of policy issues? Should they be? Or should they go back to only taking care of the wards?
Well, I think the question is, do we want to have democracy or not? We can't have a representative democracy if we don't have representatives who debate and vote on important matters and where those votes count for something. So if we want democracy, we have to have an active city council. The Tribune editorial was wrong on a number of counts. Not only their bashing of Joe Moore, but they suggested that the city council would somehow be better if it were only 15 members, like some other large cities, neglecting that New York has 51 and so forth. But that's not true. It's actually better as a legislature if it has more members. Otherwise, aldermen would be representing 150 to 200,000 people, and they wouldn't be able to do either their function as an ombudsman on service or their function in city council. I think the whole Tribune editorial was frankly totally wrong on a lot of levels. I think we want a city council which is where there are vigorous debates and where the outcomes matter. And that's what I'm hoping the next election will bring about.
Thank you, Dick. Barrett Peterson again. I heard the word gentrification mentioned, but we haven't talked very much. My thought is that the city of Chicago and its politics is going to be very dramatically affected in gentrification. I know that there are large numbers of young suburbanites actually moving into the city where they find single and nightlife more appropriate. They go to school there, they stay until they get married and move out to the suburbs to raise kids, and you're even seeing more and more yuppies staying in the city and raising kids. How is gentrification going to affect this? I don't see them as being particularly upset with Mayor Daley. Is it going to have an effect on the aldermanic elections or the mayoral election? And I'll have a follow-up.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because if we look at the aldermanic elections of '03, look at one of the biggest gentrifying wards, the First Ward, which is, of course, not the old First Ward, but the new First Ward, which is, Wicker Park, Yuki Village, that kind of area. That was actually a ward where an outside candidate beat the machine candidate. So you can't, one might assume, yes, yuppies moving into the city would like the mayor because of the tree planters and the lovely new amenities in the city. However, that was a case where you had a candidate, Jesse Granato, who was backed by the mayor and HDO and sort of the status quo organization in the city, and he lost. So, and 35th Ward, exactly, with Chai Kolong and Bilma Kolong. Exactly. Thank you for reminding me of that. And that was also another gentrifying area in which the outside candidate beat the City Hall supported candidate. So I guess one might anecdotally assume that they wouldn't necessarily support the mayor's agenda. However, if you look at those two wards where they elected outside candidates for aldermen, there was talk of them being this great independent push, when in fact they've pretty much been in lockstep with the mayor.
But on the other gentrification, it will affect the second ward race, which is probably the most gentrified ward in the city, and that's one reason Heathcock has got problems in the second ward. She doesn't play well to the gentrified set.
Oh, I don't know. Getting Fred Hampton street sign.
Yeah,
probably.
that was big. Yeah.
Went over all those yuppies on that one.
Paul, what are your thoughts on gentrification?
It's taking place all over the city. It's just not taking place in, the Wicker Park or the Ed Mazer, Damon and Division area that he takes me to for gelato. I mean, the places I wouldn't normally walk are now places where you have all these yuppies going around. It's almost like the invasion of the body snatchers. They're everywhere. But it has tremendous political importance. The old ethnic wards of the 80s are gone. The southwest side, the northwest side to some degree still there, but the southwest side, huge Hispanic populations living in the northwest side, the southwest side. The largest Hispanic population change has taken place in Belmont-Cragen on the north side. So that is really important. Obviously, the Valier may fit into that. Who knows? Bottom line is that you can't play the race game anymore like that, like you did in the 80s, one group versus another group, because it's all much more intermingled of the species, and you've got changing habits. I live along the lakefront. The word lakefront liberal is not used. It's just not there anymore. And I think if there was no corruption problem, there'd be no challenge to Daley. He'd have no problem. The corruption issue is the one issue that cuts across. All the other issues, I think, are irrelevant, including education, because no mayor has ever tackled education more than he has. Usually you run away from education. You appoint an idiot to run the school board. After 3 years, you fire him, you get another idiot. The worst part is that the idiot you fired gets hired by another city for probably a pay increase. He has certainly taken it upon himself, and having Vallis and now Duncan, they are way above the normal superintendents. That's also never been a book, The Great Public School and Superintendents of Chicago. If they would,
short.
It'd be a very thin book. But so
a novelette.
Yes. So it's only the corruption issue. That's the issue. I think even the big box issue, that's more of a union fight between the two segments of the unions than it is, dealing with Daley and other things. That's a union battle taking place with SEIU and all the other unions coming in, and trade unions now getting concerned about big box stores. Bottom line is, unless the corruption issue flares up big time, I just don't see, even the yuppies, who some of them think they live in Denver, are going to be that much of a force. The two largest concentrations of, to play the tribe game, the white voters, are in wards 32 and wards 47. That has become the new 13th and 23rd ward of Chicago when it comes to predominantly young, white, gentrifying kids. I don't know how many of those are even registered. So I think last point, I think it's up to Daley if he gets challenged by Jackson, who would be the most serious challenger he's had since Timmy Evans and Gene Sawyer went against him in '89, a legitimate challenger. He would have to create an organization. The question is he tough enough? Does he have the people around him to do it? You get a little soft after 17 years in office. The question is, how much does he want to compete and how tough is he going to do it? If he wants it and he's going to be tough about it, then I don't think he can, I'll stand on my prediction. On the other hand, if he's lazy about it and doesn't care about it, I don't know. But when you have Terry Peterson already on board, a big South Side ward, the Fighting 17th, with Father Flager, that is not going to create a unified black opposition to him. So anyways, the gentrifiers, they're there, they're unpredictable, they don't vote very much. If they do vote, it's going to have to be against Daley. It'll be only on the corruption issue.
Well, I think that's obviously what we've said from the beginning today, is that the only reason we're even talking about a contested contest is because of this new corruption issue, these federal investigations, and the fast work of Pat Fitzgerald. I think one unique thing to watch for, likely we're all, looking at the races, how has the organization been affected by the Pat Fitzgerald investigations, the Sorge trial? Are there people who, that are wondering, well, am I going to go out and work today on a campaign? Am I really going to get rewarded for it? Are they going to be able to give me the overtime I want? Are they going to be able to move me to another position? And the question is, when you have a federal monitor in City Hall monitoring hiring, I'm just, as an issue of curiosity, I don't know what you think about this, Paul, but the issue is how has this will be the first municipal investigation this will be the first municipal election since the Pat Fitzgerald investigation. So it will be interesting to see how the organization, the foot soldiers, are affected by this.
Yeah, a follow-up, and that is, in the earlier discussion, we talked about the demographic changes in the suburbs and how the Collier counties and the Cook County suburbs are voting more Democratic. How do you think that has been affected by the mayor being Mayor Daley as opposed to Harold Washington? Would those same demographic changes have been made if Harold Washington had survived and become mayor with regard to race and politics in the suburbs?
I'll just, 2 sentences. I think there's no doubt in my mind, and maybe Senator Dillard would disagree, that having Daley as mayor of Chicago has been a real boost to Democrats in suburban and Collier County, because philosophically he's right there with them. And he has kept. There is no split. The racial thing. I'll give one more sentence. Democrats are in serious trouble when they divide along race, the way Dick was talking about. The Republicans along philosophy. Since that first 2 races in '89, the racial division has been greatly overcome in Chicago because Daley has taken on issues that really never affected his core base. Most of the people who voted for Daley in 1989 and 1991 do not have children in school. And yet education is his #1 issue. Nor do they belong to public housing. These are issues that don't affect the people who vote for him. And I think that is something that's crucial in all this thing. So I said enough. Go ahead.
We'll take the questions in line, and then we're finished.
And you've already given your plug, Mr. Berkowitz.
Okay. Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs.
Yes.
Professor Green, you seem to, as you just said, that Mayor Daley, it's all about, the only problem is corruption. You seem to dismiss 3 things. One, the follow-up to corruption. Will Zorich or any of that gang flip and make for an indictment that's even worse on the corruption matter than he's had? You seem to be betting no when you talk about 58 to 62% for Daley in February. Are you being too dismissive on education and economic development? When you talk to others in this area, minorities who are also influential, they say Jackson has a strong point. Daley can talk education all he wants, but everybody knows education dollars are not distributed evenly throughout the city of Chicago. Hispanics and blacks do not fare well. That's #1 for Jesse Jackson. #2, economic development is not distributed evenly throughout the city of Chicago. Hispanics and blacks, maybe John Stroger fares well, maybe other Hispanics, maybe Terry Peterson, but those folks aren't faring well. If Jackson can make that a strong campaign theme, which registers voters, which attracts some funds, which gets votes, you're still sticking with 58% for Daley in that first go-around?
In 1982, Harold Washington had the great slogan, "Come alive on October 5." And that was the massive registration of black voters, which almost elected Adlai Stevenson governor. In fact, Adlai Stevenson thought he actually earned those votes. And so that's, I don't see the massive registration coming. Also, unlike in 1982, there are significant African-American forces who are very concerned about the Jackson family, and we'll leave it at that.
You want to elaborate?
No. I'm just very concerned about that. So, again, though, Daley's going to have David Axelrod running his campaign. He's going to have the best commercials that money can buy. I still stand by what I said before. The corruption issue is the only issue that can beat him.
Well, and the question is, very quick, brief comment, does Victor Reyes get indicted before the end of the year? If that happens,
Of course he does. Yeah.
Well,
And probably Degnan.
Well, the question is, does that happen? And I think that's a big question. And can voters make that an issue? I mean, or can the candidate make that an issue and, draw the triangle and make people believe it? I think it's still going to be very difficult to do.
Judith.
I'd like to know what the panel thinks about the mayor's pushing for the Olympics in 2016, foretelling whether he intends to be mayor until then, or at least until the final, until the big decision is made about what city's going to get it.
I could jump on that, but go ahead. Somebody else talk.
Well, there are issues with the 2016, just like there were in 1992 with when Byrne was trying to get the Olympic. I think it was the '93 Olympics here, and that has to do with, do these resources come from other worthy projects that would be in the neighborhood? Mm-hmm. It seems to me that the new plan that they're putting forth for 2016 is much more amenable because it suggests that some of the resources are going to sections of the city and neighborhoods that do need help, as opposed to simply bulldozing neighborhoods and taking all the resources for infrastructure. So I think the current 2016 proposal is pretty popular, and it will only become unpopular when we see the final price tag to city and state government.
And then it'll be too late.
Harold Washington and the state government decided not to fund the 1993 Olympics when they looked at the bottom line.
Not the World's Fair.
World's Fair,
World's
sorry.
Fair. Yeah.
World's Fair in 1993. As to whether Daley will stay in office until 2016, no. He might stay in office till 2011, and the decision would be made by then.
2016 Olympics, the budget for that will certainly not be out before February 27th, 2007.
Right. I think that's a fair guess.
And we're just going to. How about a nice round of applause for Dick Schuster and for